please make sure you do so on your way out because this will keep you updated on all of our upcoming events. Today our speaker is Melissa Winn, and she's the Director of Marketing and Communications for us here at the museum. Previously, she was Marketing Manager for the American Battlefield Trust and Director of Photography for HistoryNet, publisher of 9 history-related magazines, including America's Civil War and Civil War Times, for which she served as a primary photo researcher, photographer, and a regular writer. She's a senior editor for Military Images magazine with a regular column focused on women in the Civil War, editor of Shavings, the member newsletter of the Early American Industries Association, is a member of the Board of Directors of the Civil War Roundtable Congress, and president of the Bull Run Civil War Roundtable. She's also a member of the Professional Photographers Association, Authors Guild, Women's Relief Corps, and the Center for Civil War Photography. She collects Civil War photographs and ephemera with an emphasis on dead letter office images in Union General John Rawlins, Chief of Staff to General Ulysses S. Grant. She'll be telling us more about them both today. Now let's welcome Melissa Winn.
Thank you very much. Thanks everybody for coming, and thank you for the museum for giving me a platform to speak. I hope you get out and see the museum as well when you are here. And we have living history in camp life today. They've got a couple tables set up out there, so there's lots of stuff happening today. We started our walking tour program today as well. There'll be walking tours every Saturday and Sunday through October. Please check out our website so you can sign up to join one of those tours of Frederick, the Civil War hospital sites. I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about one of my favorite subjects, which is John Rawlins, the Union General, and his relationship with Ulysses as the oldest son in the house and the man of the house for a large family. And he was uneducated, John Rawlins at the time. He's a self-made man. Again, they say about James, some historians felt that he did have somewhat of a drinking problem. James Wilson, in his biography of John Rawlins, which came out at the turn of the 20th century, said that James, quote, is a man of determined will, but of unsettled purpose and roving disposition, kind of hinting at problems with alcohol, but not really saying it outright. And he interviewed John Rawlins's law partner for his book at the time, and his name was David Sheehan. He said, it is true that his father was addicted to drinking for many years prior to 1856, and during that time was shiftless in his conduct. In this respect, it was a source of annoyance and trouble to the rest of the family, but I think they would not want to have anything said about it. In that same letter, Sheehan also says that after 1856, James became more of a temperate man. And since 1860, I do not think he has tasted liquor, he said. He also notes that James was a good-hearted man. Again, I think this really comes into play with Rawlins's appreciation for Grant as a human being and a person outside of what could be perceived as a drinking issue. And we'll see that come into play. These are really noted as influences on John Rawlins. And again, John becomes educated. He works as in coal burning, and he educates himself. He pays for his sister's education, so he really grows up fast in this family, takes care of his family in the absence of his father. And on June 5th, 1856, he's married to a woman named Emily Smith, who will later die of tuberculosis. In the end, again, this is what will take John Rawlins as well at the age of only 38. And she actually dies right after he is commissioned to come into the Army with Ulysses S. Grant. They have, again, 3 children together. He finds a place for them to live, and he will marry again in 1863 to marry Emma Hurlburt. She's from Connecticut, and they meet in Vicksburg, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. They will have 3 children together as well, but they will all die at this point. He's pretty ill, and again, they got married in 63, and he dies in 69, and all of their children will not live past infancy. So who is Ulysses S. Grant? Grant is born in April of 1822, April 27th, and he attends West Point, graduated in 1843, and he will graduate with some people he becomes friends with at that time and graduates with people that he will then meet up with again during the Civil War. He served with distinction during the Mexican-American War, including again with some of the Army officers who would later serve beside him or opposing him during the Civil War. He marries Julia Dent in 1848, and they have 4 children. Of course, he later serves with the Union Army, becoming its commanding general and later president of the United States. So we're going to go right for this because this is going to come up a lot. Was Grant an alcoholic? This is highly debated among many scholars and historians at the time. I believe that that he really does have sort of a drinking problem, obviously you can't take a blood test and determine that he was an alcoholic. But we'll take a little time to talk about this a little bit. Many people are reluctant to say yes because, of course, he's Grant. He's great. You get the outcome of who he was. You see his military genius at play during the Civil War. So many people feel that he does not qualify as a person having a drinking problem. Of course, many of the accusations of drinking during the Civil War come, and I'll go into this a little bit more too, from generals who are jealous of him. They are using this as a political way to attack somebody who is on the rise. But Grant himself has, prior to the war, addressed his own drinking problem, and I'll tell you a little bit about that. Also, I think I'll just say a little bit about alcoholism or having a drinking problem. I think our definition of it today is a little more sophisticated than it was at that time. And, the Harvard Medical School actually talks about some of the defining characteristics of an alcohol disorder or dependence or alcoholism, whatever you want to call it, problem drinker. They say drinks more than intended, loss of control over the amount of alcohol used, desire to stop drinking but an inability to do so. That's going to be key here. Excessive time spent getting or using alcohol or recovering from its effects, craving or preoccupation with drinking, problems stemming from alcohol use, ignoring these problems and drinking despite hazards and physical danger, or consequences from your drinking. These are just some of the characteristics of a drinking problem, a drinking issue, having that. Again, like many diseases or disorders, there's a spectrum for this issue. And today we recognize that there are many people with a drinking issue or problem drinkers or alcohol dependence or alcoholism that have overcome many of these issues and been successful people. They have had consequences and they've gone on to have successful lives. So the idea of an alcoholic as somebody who lives under a bridge and, with a bottle in a plastic bag or a paper bag is sort of an antiquated idea of an alcoholic. One of the key factors, I think, about alcoholism is this idea of taking one drink and having a craving that is sort of makes it difficult to abstain from alcohol after having that one drink. And this is very key to the story of Ulysses S. Grant. Again, Grant wanted not to drink, and this comes up before the Civil War, as early as 1849 to 1850, when he was stationed in Detroit. He has trouble abstaining from alcohol there, where heavy drinking was commonplace at the garrison, and Julia was back in St. Louis with their newborn baby. Julia's presence is a motivator to Grant not to drink. And I think this is true, again, you can see for alcoholics in today's world, where they have motivators outside of themselves that help them to abstain from alcohol and be successful and great people. Julia was that for Grant in many ways, and also I think we'll show you that Rawlins was as well. Again, at this time when he's stationed in Detroit, he sought counsel from his pastor at his church, Dr. George Taylor, and one of Grant's comrades at the time said that, quote, "I think that Dr. Taylor helped Grant a great deal." It was said that he had a long talk with Grant at that time and told him that he could not safely use liquor in any form, And Grant acknowledged this and took the pledge, and thereafter used no liquor at all in Detroit. In his biography about Grant, Ron Chernow writes that this and other episodes really show that Grant was at this point in his life trying to control his drinking. In 1851, Grant is transferred to Sackett's Harbor, New York, where boredom and loneliness once again begin to eat at his resolve to abstain from alcohol, and he seeks out help again from the temperance movement. He told a friend there that he had heard one of the temperance movement's leading members, John Gogg, lecture. I heard him lecture the other night, and I've become convinced that there is no safety from being ruined by drink except from abstaining from liquor altogether. Again, Gogg was a reformed drinker himself, and he was a wide lecturer at the time, and he extracted from people who came to see him pledges of abstinence. This will come up again in Grant's life. At Sackett's Harbor, Grant actually helps to organize the Rising Sun Division, Lodge number 210 of the Sons of Temperance, and took the pledge not to, quote, make, buy, sell, or use a beverage of any spirituous or malt liquors, wine, or cider. He's later stationed at Fort Humboldt, where again he suffers loneliness and boredom, maybe even depression, and has trouble abstaining from alcohol. He clashes with his commander here, and he was warned in 1854 by his commander to, quote, resign or reform. And this is due to several drinking episodes. Grant replies to him, I will resign if I don't reform. A few days later, he shows up at the pay table under the influence of alcohol, and he is forced to resign. He does not want Julia to know anything about this episode. He does not want to face a court-martial, so he resigns from the U.S. Army at this point in his life. So does Grant have a problem with alcohol? Yes, I think so. I think this clearly shows that he does. He's having some consequences from it, and he's having a little bit of a trouble controlling it. To me, I don't think that this detracts from his character at all. In fact, to me, I think that this is Grant's greatest success, is how successful and great he was as a general to overcome this issue as well, in order to become this person. After Grant resigns from the Army, he has a string of bad luck with farming and businesses, including trusting shady business partners who swindle him for money. Grant's a very trusting person. He really sees the good in people. He doesn't have a lot of maliciousness inside of himself, so he has trouble seeing that from other people. And John Rawlins will really come and play a huge role in this part of his life as well, really helping him to sort of see the character that comes out from other people and protecting him from it. So in 1860, Grant is destitute. He's 38. He has 4 children, a wife, and no money, and no job. So he does pretty much the last thing that in the world that he wants to do. He moves to Winn, Illinois, to work as a clerk in his father's leather shop, a job that he really does not like, but he has no choice. It is here that he will meet John Rawlins. John Rawlins is a lawyer in Galena at this point. His office is a block away from the leather store, and he is the leather store's lawyer at the time. Grant's reputation for drink follows him to Galena. Of course, he's resigned from the Army due to this, but all that knew him in Galena reported that he was sober and never seen drunk. His Mexican War service also followed him here, and he regaled people with stories from the war, which they, of course, loved. John Rawlins loved these stories and loved to hear him talk about them. And the two who had very different temperaments. John Rawlins was excitable, exacerbated by conditions. He swore a lot. He, was real animated. And Grant's very humble, modest, quiet, and really sort of soaking in the world. They're very different people, but they became friends at this time. After Fort Sumter fell and the outbreak of the Civil War, Galena's residents held a town hall meeting on April 16th of 1861. This is after Lincoln's call for volunteers, and of course the town feels that they need to do something. The featured speakers at this lecture included U.S. Congressman L. Hugh Washburn, who will also play a huge role in Grant's life. He's a very influential congressman at the time. He's very good friends with Abraham Lincoln, and he will really advocate for Grant during this period of time and help Grant raise through the ranks. Rawlins made at this time a pro-union sentiment clear in an electrifying speech. Rawlins was a well-known politician type in the city at the time, so he was one of the other speakers. And his speech, he says, "I have been a Democrat all my life, but this is no longer a question of politics. It is simply country or no country. I have favored every honorable compromise, but the day for compromise is past. Only one course is left us. We will stand by the flag of our country and appeal to the God of battles." Walking back to the leather store, Grant and his brother Orville, he was moved by this speech. And he later tells a biographer for Rawlins that Rawlins had stirred my patriotism and rekindled my military ardor. He told his brother walking back at that night, "I think I ought to go back into the service." And his brother agreed. And this begins Grant's return to the U.S. Army. On April 25th, Grant leaves Galena with the Joe Davies Guard to offer his services to Governor Yates in Springfield, Illinois, and he helps to raise 10 regiments for the Army. On June 28th, he's now Colonel Grant, and he and the 7th District Regiment entered the U.S. service as the 21st Illinois Infantry. It does not take Grant long to rise in ranks. He's got a lot of military experience, and he's Grant. He's great. He's really got a lot of military genius behind him that will come out in many campaigns throughout the war, of course, which helps to lead to his rise as well. And he quickly becomes a brigadier general. In early August, he's made a brigadier general, and now he needs a staff. So he brings people with him. He's well known for keeping his staff as loyal members, people that are loyal to him, people that he knows. He chooses people for his first staff and many staffs afterwards that he's already, he already knows and they're friends with him. This will come into play during his presidency and actually not be a good thing. But during the Civil War, it turns out in his favor. He picks William Hillier, who he had worked with prior to the Civil War, Clark Lagaw, who was in his former regiment, and Dr. James Simons, and then, as you can see in the upper right corner, John Rawlins. On August 30th, again, the same day that Rawlins' wife actually dies from tuberculosis, he was appointed the Assistant Adjutant General with the rank of Captain, effectively Grant's Chief of Staff. With no military background, Rawlins is grateful to be made to have such a high appointment here. And on September 15th, after attending to his wife's final wishes and placement of his 3 children with family to care for them, Rawlins arrives at camp with Grant. As one of his duties, and based on the knowledge that Grant had to resign from the Army because of the drinking problem, and Grant and Rawlins, again, Rawlins is a temperate man, and he abhors alcohol. He does not touch liquor at all. He extracts a pledge from Grant not to drink during the Civil War, and Grant agrees to this pledge. So Grant, I think, sort of welcomes this pledge, and it's a motivator to him, to focus on the war. Rawlins, of course, acts as a guard against rumors of drinking as well. Those will come up plenty. Most of the stories of Grant's drinking during the war are all rumor and did not actually happen, but they persist nonetheless. So what does an assistant adjutant general do? According to Al Ottens, who released a biography about Rawlins, which is up here on the table, no ordinary man. All orders, reports, and information were funneled through the assistant adjutant general. He was the keeper of the records and the books containing general and special orders, as well as the letter book that held a record of letters sent. He prepared status reports on numbers of casualties suffered, prisoners captured, and property seized. He was the custodian of reports, such as courts-martial proceedings, and besides carrying out these informational functions, the assistant adjutant general, say that 3 times fast, depending on the commander, might assume some more independent responsibilities as well, such as ascertaining the commander's orders have been properly executed, providing advisement to the commander, which we'll see a lot of that from Rawlins and Grant, and when necessary, issues orders in the name of the commander. As the war unfolds, Grant entrusts all of these to Rawlins. The first time that Grant and Rawlins are linked together on an official military document is General Orders Number 6 on September 16th, 1861. September 16th is also my son's birthday, and he's in the audience. The order is actually aimed to curtail the abuse of leaves of absences and free passes, and there's a copy of it here, if you want to see it. That's an original copy from the Civil War. So, Rawlins was busy. Otten says that Rawlins' value to Grant as a confidant, administrator, advisor, and loyal staffer cannot be denied. Eli Parker, who eventually is on Grant's staff as well, says that dating back to pre-war Galena, he once told Washburn that Rawlins was absolutely indispensable to General Grant. I am also very confident that General Grant's continued success will to a great extent depend upon his retaining General Rawlins and his privy counselor and right-hand man. Grant was a little bit naive and trusting, as I've said before, and he didn't really have the sort of guard against malice or people with bad intent for him. And Rawlins had no trouble telling anybody no. This was one of his assets to camp, and it was definitely one of his assets to Grant. Grant, I think, really appreciated this. In one of the 4 instances in the memoirs that Grant does talk about Rawlins, he says, Rawlins remained with me as long as he lived and rose to the rank of Brigadier General and Chief of Staff to the General of the Army, an office that was created for him before the war closed. He was an able man, possessed of great firmness, and could say no so emphatically to any request which he thought should not be made, not be granted, that the person he was addressing would understand at once that there was no use of pressing the matter. General Rawlins was a very useful officer in other ways than this. I became very much attached to him. This is the most personal nature in which he mentions Rawlins in his memoirs. And again, I think he chooses his words very wisely here. He's very particular about his writing. Grant is at this time. And, when he says he's a useful officer in other ways than this, I think he's referring to some of this confidant, guardianship, conscience, those other roles that Rawlins played. The staff's telegraph operator, Samuel Beckwith, said, quote, "It was no novel thing to hear the zealous subordinate administer to his superior a stiff verbal castigation because of some act that met with Rawlins's disapproval, and Grant never resented any reprimand bestowed by Rawlins." A journalist who followed the staff said General Grant was a man who made friends very slowly. While he had a great many acquaintances, I think he had a very limited circle of friends. I mean, whom he trusted or whose advice he accepted. And Grant's biographer Chernow says that Rawlins could penetrate the zone of privacy that Grant drew subtly about himself. Rawlins could confront him with uncomfortable truths and fiercely contest his judgment, spouting opinions in a stentorian voice. With his thoroughgoing skepticism and mistrust of people, he was the ideal foil to Grant's excessively trusting nature. Rawlins, quote, according to one of their comrades, was always getting excited about something that had been done to Grant. Recalled Lieutenant Frank Parker, when someone would show disrespect to Grant, he would prance around and say, "General, I would not stand such things." To which Grant would say, "Oh, Rawlins, what's the use in getting excited over a little thing like that? It doesn't hurt me and it makes the other fellow feel a little better." During the siege of Vicksburg, a pivotal Civil War campaign that saw Union forces led by Ulysses S. Grant besiege the Confederate-held city of Vicksburg, Mississippi from May 18th to July 4th, 1863. Their close working relationship and personal relationship is really on display during this campaign. It demonstrates a lot about Grant's military prowess. This is a brilliant campaign that is still used today to train the military on strategy. It also challenges Grant on several accounts, and we'll talk about that. You can't talk about Vicksburg without talking about and I can't say it without a sneer in my voice, McClernand. General John McClernand. McClernand gave a headache to Grant and Rawlins throughout most of this campaign, and prior to that as well. McClernand was a political general, and for those who don't know, many people in the political sphere were made generals by Lincoln at the beginning of the war because of political, benefits to Lincoln for his war efforts. They did not have military experience, but they were put in charge of military troops. McClernand had a little bit of experience during the Black Hawk War, but prior to that, not really. He was not really a military person. He was a politician, and he was a political general. Grant hated political generals because they don't come to the front line with experience that you need to have. And they often have big egos, which McClernand certainly did. This is one of the things. McClernand takes a lot of credit for the strategies that Grant had put into place for battles before Vicksburg. Those are successes that largely were due to Grant. But Grant's modest nature, again, is to not care. He's not really concerned about what people think about him. He's not fighting off some of these rumors himself because he's concerned about winning the next battle. That's Grant. He's concerned about, where are we going next? How are we pushing forward? How are we winning this war? Rawlins had often cautioned Grant about the duplicitous nature of General John McClernand and sought to protect Grant and the Army from McClernand's self-serving intentions. Ahead of a critical engagement during the Vicksburg siege, McClernand actually reports back to Grant that he has captured 2 forts, and with more men he could break through the Confederate defenses. This report turns out to be erroneous, but it influences Grant's decision-making for a May 22nd, 1863 attack. And it costs many unnecessary lives. Quote, I shall never forget the fearful burst of indignation from Rawlins and the grim, glowering look of disappointment and disgust which settled on Grant's usually placid countenance when he was convinced of McClernand's duplicity and realized the cost in dead and wounded, remembered one journalist. Eventually, Grant is given the go-ahead to relieve McClernand, which he's happy to do. Rawlins takes great pleasure in this as well and sends one of the other staffers to do it at 2 a.m. in the morning. McClernand was waiting. He's sitting in his tent with his sword laid out in front of him. He knew it was time for him to go. Also during the Vicksburg campaign, Grant cannot escape the subject of his drinking, whether it be real and many times exaggerated stories for political gains. McClernand is one of the top contenders for spreading these rumors. He takes full advantage of this sort of impression that these drinking allegations can have against a rising star like Grant. McClernand works with other generals to do the same, but there are a lot of reports at this time during downtimes during the campaign. Never, and this is never, when they are engaged in battle or when it might be inappropriate for Grant to be intoxicated. None of these reports, rumors, anything ever come at those times. None of the reports that comes in at the time is more damning than a Cincinnati paper who wrote to Salmon P. Chase that Grant is a poor drunken imbecile. He's a poor stick sober, and he is most of the time more than half drunk, and much of the time idiotically drunk. About 2 weeks ago, he was so miserably drunk for 24 hours that his staff kept him shut up in a stateroom on the steamer where he makes his headquarters because he was hopelessly foolish. In conveying this letter to Lincoln, he notes that there are reports concerning General Grant similar to the statement made by this editor, Mr. Halstead, are too common to be safely or even prudently disregarded. Grant's biographer, Chernow, also notes, and again, I think it is worth noting that this is a man in Cincinnati discussing somebody many, many states away. But Grant's biographer, Chernow, also notes that many of the descriptions of Grant drunk they're similar. He's always described as sort of foolish, childishly drunk, jolly in his behavior, never angry, never abusive. They are all very similar accounts in there. made by people who could not corroborate that impression of Grant. Lincoln, however, of course, these all go up to Lincoln. He refuses to, even if he believes them or not, to let Grant go. He needs generals who are willing to fight, and Grant is one of the only that's out there fighting at this time. He could not afford to let General Grant go. He says, I think Grant has hardly a friend left except myself. What I want is generals who will fight battles and win victories. Grant has done this, and I propose to stand by him. And at this time, Lincoln actually sends to their camp a spy, Charles Dana. He is sent there by Edwin Stanton, who gave Dana a mission as a plausible cover story. The ostensible function I shall give you will be that of Special Commissioner of the War Department to investigate the pay service of the Western armies. But your real duty will be to report to me every day what you see, he says. And he is to report back to Stanton an honest assessment of what's happening in camp, including Grant's drinking habits. To Grant's credit, and Rawlins, he meets Dana with what people call disarming civility. They do not run from him. They are well aware of why he is in camp. The staff all knew what the purpose of Charles Dana's visits were. Rawlins actually sets Dana's tent up right next to Grant's. We have nothing to hide. And Dana actually reports back to Stanton about Rawlins and Grant's friendship, saying that Rawlins is a lawyer by profession, a townsman of Grant's, and has a great influence over Grant, especially because he watches him day and night. And whenever he commits the folly of tasting liquor, he hastens to remind him that at the beginning of the war, he gave Rawlins his word of honor not to touch a drop as long as it lasted. Dana strikes up a close friendship with Grant. Grant's a likable guy. He does not have airs about him. He's, a very humble, modest person. And eventually he will actually cover up one of the most famous drinking episodes that does happen during the Civil War with Grant. On June 1863, Grant was on an inspection trip of the Yazoo River with Dana, and Grant was ill and prescribed wine as a remedy. Now this, again, I think is key. Remember what I said about taking a drink, and if you have a problem with alcohol, you cannot stop your craving for drinking. It leads to more cravings for drinking or more drinking. Grant is prescribed this alcohol because he's ill. And Grant, did not have many episodes during the war, and again, never during any time during which he was supposed to be in battle or commanding troops. He was ill again on this, and this led to a reportedly drunken trip on the Yazoo River, and Dana reports this after to his staff, but does not report it to Edwin Stanton. I think that even Dana and all of the staff members there understood how important Grant was to the Union Army. Rawlins, of course, hears of this, and he's incensed. He writes a letter to Grant saying, "The great solicitude I feel for the safety of this army leads me to mention what I had hoped never again to do, the subject of your drinking. I have heard that Dr. McMillan induced you, notwithstanding your pledge to me, to take a glass of wine. And today, when I found a box of wine in front of your tent and proposed to move it, which I did, I was told that you had forbid it being taken, for you intended to keep it until you entered Vicksburg, that you might have it for your friends. And tonight, when you should, because of the condition of your health," and remember he's ill, "if nothing else, have been in bed, I find you where the wine bottle has just been emptied, in the company of those who drink and urge you to do likewise, and the lack of your usual promptness of decision and clearness in expressing yourself in writing tended to confirm my suspicions. You have the full control of your appetite to let drinking alone. Had you not pledged to me the sincerity of your honor that you would drink no more during the war and kept that pledge during your recent campaign, you would not today have stood first in the world's history as a successful military leader." This is a pretty strict letter to write to your superior officer. And again, I think this really shows the personal relationship that they had. And again, I think it's important to note how Rawlins addresses this to Grant, saying, you have control of this, just control your appetite for it. You are a great military leader. This Union Army needs you. We need you. And he sees the greatness that is Grant, as long as he can control this appetite. Again, this is a strict letter to write, but Grant, again, welcomes this sort of reining in. He does not take any action against Rawlins, and in fact, just days later, he will nominate him for a brigadier generalship, which he will receive. And on July 4th, 1863, the Confederates, under General John Pemberton, they surrender Vicksburg to Grant. One day after the Union victory at Gettysburg. A resounding success for Grant. Again, to me, this is his greatest success, that he's able to be Grant, just like this. These two also had a close friendship. As you can imagine, they're in camp together, day in and day out. This is kind of a fun story about their relationship. This is Rawlins's horse. And this bay horse had been a gift from Galena friends to commemorate Rawlins's appointment to Grant's staff in August 1861. Rawlins was known to be particularly fond of its lavishly long tail. One morning, Rawlins found that the tail had been reduced to a 2-inch stub. Rawlins, of course, who is excitable, is raging and round, declaring that should he ever find the enemy who did it, he would shoot him. And an amused Grant, in fits of laughter, says, well, if you find the enemy, don't get too mad. It's probably a mule who munched off the tail. And he was known for weeks to be amused by the shortening of this horse's tail and would ride behind Rawlins in fits of laughter. If you look at this photo, you can see that that tail is drawn on that horse. It's drawn onto the plate. So they had a very close friendship as well. In 1863, after they capture Vicksburg, Rawlins also meets his second wife, Mary Emma Hurlburt. The Union Army will take up headquarters, Grant will take up headquarters at the Lum House. The Lum House is, of course, owned by Samuel Lum, and his family is Confederates. Of course, they move up to the top of the house at this time, and they have a nanny to their children. Her name is Mary Emma Hurlburt. They call her Emma. Rawlins is a moralist, if you haven't guessed. He's very proper, and he has a lot of things to say about this kind of behavior and how people should act. One of the officers gives Emma flowers, and he later finds out that this officer is married, which he's aghast by. And he decides to take it upon himself to protect her from these officers. At first, he actually runs to Grant with this dismay, oh, can you believe this behavior? And he's, I'm going to take charge of this. And Grant's kind of like, fine, whatever, take care of it, So he decides that he's going to be the go-between. And Emma actually at this time is really acting as the go-between the family and the Union officers living in their home. And he's now the sole person for her to contact for the Army. Takes care of that, and they fall in love, and they get married. Again, they do have 3 children themselves. She will take care of his children for a while as well. And this is her actually at City Point with them. That's his daughter, Jane. Rawlins, at this point, also starts to begin to develop symptoms of tuberculosis. After Vicksburg, he moves up in rank and becomes a brigadier general again. Theodore Bowers will take on the assistant adjutant role, and this officially makes Rawlins Grant's chief of staff and advisor, and they will move on to the war, through the war together, all the way to Appomattox. There is a point when they are at City Point that Rawlins has to take a leave of absence for a few months to return home. He's starting to develop a lot more symptoms of tuberculosis, and he comes back after that and remains with Grant. And as Grant's star rises, so does Rawlins. He stays with him his whole life. He becomes, after brigadier generalship, he's breveted a major general in February of 1865, He becomes the Major General of the United States Army in April 9th, 1865, of course, after the surrender at Appomattox. And he will move on with Grant to his administration when he's president. Rawlins goes to Washington with Grant, and in 1867, during Reconstruction, Rawlins actually follows a military escort out to see where the Union Pacific Railroad was being made at that time. And he follows, you can see Grenville Dodge actually on the left here. Rawlins is on the right. This is later, 1867. You can see he's becoming quite ill. He follows this military escort. At that time, tuberculosis was very misunderstood, and people really thought if you just got some dry air, clean air in your lungs, that you would be saved from, the ravages of this disease. And everybody believed this very strongly. So he actually follows this mostly to try to help with his health at the time. Everybody likes Rawlins a lot. That should be stated. Dodge liked him quite a great deal and names one of the expedition's Wyoming campsites, Rawlins, after him. The site was later incorporated as a town, and it's still there today, Rawlins, Wyoming. After a few months traveling with Dodge, Rawlins does return to Washington, D.C., but his health is not improved at all. When Grant, of course, ascends to the presidency, he's choosing his administration. Grant is very, very fond of Rawlins. And again, at this time, he's very sick, and his doctors are saying that he needs to go to the Southwest. He needs to go out to dry air, telling him to go to Arizona to save his life. And at this point, when Grant is creating his administration, of course he wants Rawlins by his side, where he's been since the beginning of the Civil War, but he decides he's going to help Rawlins and appoints him to be the commander of the Southwest. James Wilson is told to deliver this news to Rawlins. When he does, Rawlins is incensed and says, "What? I have to be by Grant's side. I should be Secretary of War." And he returns to Grant, and Grant says, well, Rawlins says he thinks he should be Secretary of War. And again, these two are very close. Grant turns to Wilson and says, "You tell him he shall be Secretary of War." And he's made Secretary of War. He's only able to serve in that capacity. I'm going to go back to this for a second. He's only able to serve in this capacity for a few months. Again, he's very ill at the time. On September 6th of 1869, Rawlins is dying in bed. He had seen Grant a few days before, but Grant was in Saratoga with Julia. The staff informs Grant that he's very ill and probably he should return to see Rawlins before he dies. Grant is trying to get back, but his train at this time is upheld and he's delayed. Grant is trying to get back. Rawlins is insisting to the, Sherman actually is with him at the time, keeps asking, when will the old man get here? When will he be here? Grant is on his way. Sherman eventually says he'll be here in 10 minutes. Rawlins dies about 4:15, and Grant is able to get there at 5:15. He misses him. And despondent by the fact that he misses him, he sets up vigil next to Rawlins' corpse in the bed. And it is Sherman who has to remove him from the room and tell him he needs to go back to the White House and rest. This is one of the episodes that also creates the conspiracy theory that there was some animosity between Grant and Rawlins. Some of the players who have the conspiracy about him being left out of the memoirs or feel that Rawlins was slighted by Grant because of that, or written out of history because of it. This is one of those episodes that they start to bring up that, oh, Grant, if he really cared, he would have been there on time. But this is also where I think that story can be debunked, because Grant and Rawlins were devoted to each other. I think this is really where you see how close and devoted they were. They were family to each other. In his will, Rawlins leaves Grant as the executor of his estate, including the guardian of his 3 children. Grant takes care of these children, their expenses, the selling of his estate, purchasing a home for Emma after his death. In 1872, when she remarries and becomes ill herself with tuberculosis, Grant is still in their lives, makes sure that they are removed into a home of somebody who can care for them. He brings them back to be cared for by the first wife, Emily Smith's family in Goshen, New York. He gets an appointment for Rawlins' son to West Point. He will try to attend one of the daughter's weddings. That he will see to their caretaking until the day he dies, and when he dies, Julia will continue this legacy of caring for those children. Literally, there are letters where he's picking out cupboards with Emma of their home while he's the President of the United States. So he was a very great man. These are his children, James, and in the middle is Jenny or Jane, and Emily on the right. Also, and again, I think this is what really demonstrates, and I'll wrap it up here soon, their close relationship, and again, that there was no animosity between these two at this time or any time. There was an effort after Rawlins' death to have a memorial made to him, and nobody championed it more than Grant. The effort begins in 1869, but by 1872 it is waning. There are no funds for it, and Grant writes a letter to Congress to address the delay, imploring them to find the funding to put this monument to Rawlins in D.C. to honor his friend. And this monument is there to this day. It is in Rawlins Park, which is in the Foggy Bottom area of Washington, D.C. It is a beautiful setting. This is last weekend, actually. These are the magnolias. I go there frequently. This is a little fun. That's my car. That's my license plate. This is Kurt Fields, who does a fantastic impression of General Grant. In 1885, again, Grant will write his 2-volume memoirs. Briefly again, his efforts to write these memoirs are because he has been entered into a bad business deal because he has trusted the wrong people with his money, and actually his son's money as well. And he would have died destitute if he had not written these memoirs. He writes these memoirs in an effort to leave his legacy, but also to leave Julia with something to live on. And of course he does. They're a bestseller, still to this day. And they are beautiful. He writes these, and again, that's sort of where the conspiracy about their, whether they're close or not, comes from these memoirs. But I think, and I've talked to many people about this, you can look at the fact that it's 20 years after Rawlins has died that he writes these memoirs. Rawlins has been gone for a long time. And also, Rawlins is a staff officer. As close as they were, he's not a military officer that's out there commanding troops. He's not, these memoirs are a lot about the action that took place, the military action, and not necessarily about camp life or Rawlins telling everybody in camp that they can't have alcohol. That doesn't make it in here. And of course, Grant never mentions a word about drinking in these memoirs. That part is written out of history, and maybe perhaps with it some of Rawlins' role in that effort. But again, I don't think that there's any animosity. I don't think it's a calculated, on Grant's part to try to steal some of the, thunder or from Rawlins. Rawlins, again, despite that, he becomes less well known because he isn't written in many of these things that become sort of primary sources for the history that we have today. Does become a lot less known than Grant, of course, but at the time he was very, very well liked and very well known. These are a couple more photos of the two of them. This is a neat thing. Actually, this GAR is the veterans group of the Union Army. It was made for Union veterans to receive sort of really mostly fellowship, but they really become one of the largest lobbying efforts at the time to get pensions, health care for Union veterans. One of the first posts in Washington, D.C. is named after John Rawlins. Still ribbon. Here. A very neat story, too. And when John Rawlins dies in 1869, he's buried at Congressional Cemetery. And at that point in time, it was a revered cemetery. That's, where Congress members were buried, and he was buried there. The cemetery itself kind of gets into disrepair. People ignore it. Arlington Cemetery takes precedence over that. All of his Civil War comrades who are buried in the D.C. area are buried in Arlington Cemetery. This post endeavors to have him removed from Congressional Cemetery in the 1890s, which at this point is in very high disrepair. Many stones are turned over. It's being neglected. They actually reach out to Rawlins's family and have him reinterred in Arlington Cemetery. It's a grand ceremony down Pennsylvania Avenue, horses and full military regale. His son and his daughter were right there. The other daughter had already died at this point. It was 1899, February of 1899. He's reburied in Arlington Cemetery, and this is his headstone there, the monument that's to him there. It's actually right on the slope. Oh, you can actually see Johnny Clem is buried there too. He's very close to Gibbon. So many Civil War comrades or notables are on the side of this hill here, side with him. On that day, the post office department postmaster actually gave a speech and said, "The fame of Rawlins has not gone trumpet-tongued all over the earth. His achievements fill no blazing pages of historic annals. It is one of the penalties of his self-abnegating career that the laurel crown could never come to him, but with his contemporaries and comrades there dwelt a full appreciation of what he did and what he was. Among their survivors, his memory is cherished with a gratitude that is imperishable." These are a few more photos of Rawlins. I have a whole bunch of stuff up here on the table. Photos of Rawlins, some photos of Grant, and some other documents as well. That general order is up here. There is a letter from Rawlins to his wife after Grant is made the Lieutenant General. Rawlins goes to D.C. with him and writes home, and that letter is up here. Actually, one of the orders that he'll write for Grant as well and signed in his name is up here too, and some other photos. This is a fun day. If you don't know about cinematography as well, many of them were made in these stereo formats, and this is a stereo viewer, and if you put your eyes up to it, this picture comes to life in 3D. And what?
Like the old.
Yeah, it's like an old, what are that? Yeah, the viewfinders, the Viewmaster, yep, absolutely. The Viewmaster is literally designed off of this technology, if you want to call it that, but that's what it is. And, off on a side rail, but most Civil War photography was actually meant to be viewed this way. If you look at a lot of Matthew Brady's images, they were actually printed up this way. And if you start to look at some of the photos, you'll start to see that he started to put things in a foreground, a middle ground, a background, in an effort to make things really pop when you look through here. And it's pretty neat to see it, And with that, I will take questions if you have any. Thank you. Yes.
Does Rawlins have any living descendants today that we know of?
I do believe that one of his daughters went on to have children, who then went on to have children, but I'm not sure if there are any descendants. To this day, direct line, there are other descendants in relation to him. Again, Rawlins had a large family. So there are descendants from there, actually, and a little other side rail story about that. This book here came out in 2021 by Al Ottens, and when he published this book, which is really the definitive biography of Rawlins, there's one other by James Wilson, but otherwise nothing really. And when this book came out, one of the descendants of one of Rawlins's, brother siblings, who had cousin this by 25 times removed, whatever, a friend of his actually, there was a man who was writing a history letter back in the 60s. I think he was writing a history project, who was told by his friend, "Oh, hey, I have this box up in my attic of all this stuff. It's like Civil War related or something, so, you could use this if you want to for your project." Gives the box to him, he uses some of it, puts it in his attic, sees this book and says, that name sounds really familiar, and it is a box of Rawlins's stuff, and it is Rawlins's shoulder boards from the war, some photographs that had not been seen. They were actually, some of them are family members, we'll never know who they are. Most of them are related to his first wife, Emily. And so that passed down, and that actually last year was installed. It was given to the U.S. Grant Library, and now it's in installments. There's an exhibit of his belongings there. A copy of that letter that I read is also in those belongings too. Yes?
What's the deal on a sweetheart deal that Grant got for his memoir book?
Well, so Mark Twain actually helped him quite a bit. To not only work on the book, help write it, but also did get him quite a good deal for the publishing rights of it. Yes.
Like, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, well, the deal was good. I don't know exactly what the numbers were. Those were good, but it really was the royalties that came in after that paid for most of it. Mark Twain was a good businessman. I mean, he understood. If you publish these are bestseller. I don't even think Grant really had an inkling of how popular they would be, and they were very popular, and they made Julia quite a bit of money, yes. But again, before that, she was penniless. I mean, he had unfortunately gotten into a business deal that took everything that they had left. Yes.
This might be like a somewhat unusual question, but so obviously with the whole McLaren scandal and all that, like Rawlins was kind of the person who said, okay, you got to watch out.
Yeah.
And in the speech that he had in Galena early on, he said he's a longtime Democrat. McLaren's also a Democrat. Illinois is a pretty politically connected state.
Yeah.
Is there any pre-war connections between the two of them? I mean, McLaren's a more well-known figure, and Rawlins is more of a lawyer, but is there kind of a precedent which Rawlins acted on as he's kind of saying to Grant, better watch out?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know of any connection that they had in Illinois beforehand, but it was very early in the war that McLaren starts to show his true colors. I mean, they're fighting at Belmont in 1861, and even there, he's starting to take credit for what Grant has achieved. And I mean, in McLaren's defense, which I can't even believe I'm about to say, but he was given, the go-ahead to raise troops for Vicksburg. So some of his complaints maybe have a little, I mean, Sherman comes in and takes those troops and, away from him and uses them. So, he's not the worst political general, maybe, but he's definitely not on my nice list. So. But I don't think it was hard to see his duplicitous nature. If you really, I don't think you had to look very hard for it. Again, and really, he slips up to himself. He's the one who hangs himself. He's, leaks to the press, strategy, takes credit for stuff that he hasn't really accomplished, and that was all he needed. You weren't allowed to do that. So it's not even like Grant and Rawlins had to find a way to get rid of him. He got rid of himself. So, yes.
If Rawlins hadn't died so young, what could you have seen him doing with his life after the war? Like, what do you think he might have done?
Well, I definitely think that he would have stayed with Grant through his administration, through all 8 years. There are a lot of people that say that if he would have, probably a lot of the scandal that marked Grant's unfortunate presidency might not have happened. I mean, again, a lot of what happens, I think Grant did a lot of great stuff in efforts to try to keep Reconstruction going in the South. He did a lot of really great things, but his presidency is really marked by some scandal, mostly from trusting the wrong people that he thought, like Orville Babcock, people he thought were close to him and were telling the truth, and they were not. And they knew that they could get away with stuff because Grant might not see it. He was a little naive on some of those more sophisticated things. Rawlins wouldn't have stood for it. He would have, he wouldn't have seen some of that stuff through. So we'll never know, but
It's tragic how short people's lives are.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. If you think about 38, I mean, 38, geez, I haven't done anything for 38. You know, I mean, that's a lot to do at such a young age. He's 31 when he goes off to the war, you know. Absolutely. Yes.
I'm a big Grant fan as well, and found your lecture really interesting.
Thank you.
I can't remember who said it, but there's, I believe, either a biographer says something to the effect of, if you knock on Grant's head, Rawlins' brains fall out.
Yeah.
Do you think that any kind of, like maybe Rawlins, like kind of in a way, influence kind of more of Grant's detractors by saying such things about Rawlins kind of being the brains behind the operations and not so much Grant?
I don't think that Rawlins would have done that himself. I do think Rawlins, in his letters, is sort of put upon by his responsibility to keep Grant sober. You know, in some of his letters to his wife, he's kind of chumping himself up a little bit, maybe, you know, even himself, talking about this heavy role or heavy burden that he plays in that respect. I don't think that he would have taken credit for Grant's military strategy. I do think they talked about it quite a bit. Eventually, Rawlins does become involved with some of it. Rawlins and Sherman actually disagree with some of Grant's first approaches to Vicksburg. And yeah, I mean, they don't agree. But Grant chooses to do what he wants to do. I think some of the, I do think he takes into, you know, account some of what Rawlins thinks about these issues, but Grant is his own man in terms of military strategy. And I think in the end, some of those reports about, you know, even knocking on, you know, Grant's head and Rawlins coming out is Charles Dana and Sylvanus Cadwalder, who was also on the staff, they become sort of disgruntled with Grant when he's a politician. And a lot of the animosity or the feelings of animosity come out when James Wilson, who was also on the staff, is writing the biography of Rawlins. And that's where that's, you know, when Grant's the president, or he's been president and he's wronged some people who thought he should have, you know, put them in their administration or something like that. So there's a lot of messiness involved with some of that stuff, and I think that might be part of it, you know, where Sylvanus Cadwalder was very close with Rawlins. They lived together, actually. He lived with the Rawlins family in D.C. when they were here after the war, and even names his son after Rawlins. So he was pretty mad at Grant after he did not mention Rawlins in his memoirs more. And he's one of the biggest, you know, proponents of this conspiracy theory about him being left out. And he actually writes a pretty damning memoir himself about his time. He was a journalist, but he writes a pretty damning account of some of drunken episodes of Grant well after Rawlins and Grant, and it doesn't get published till the 1950s. So some of it comes out during that time. So it's a real twisted, you know, history between the two of them. And so,
Thank you.
yeah. Keep liking Grant, he's great. I'm a big fan of Grant's too. I don't know how you can't be, but. Okay, thank you so much everybody for coming. There's still time to go see the museum, so please do.
Where's the living history stuff? First floor?
Yes, if you go out this room and just straight down the ramp,